Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and in particular our children. We're very happy to have the children here. Professor Soyinka has been eager to meet with the children. He's going to be reading an excerpt from his his childhood memoirs. Children, are you excited? Would you clap if you're excited? This is part of the Third Garden City Literary Festival. We have just come from the University of Port Harcourt, where we had a conference and like a media session. If you look at your program and our advertisements, you would see that we were supposed to have Monsieur Jean-Marie Clezio with us, the French Nobel laureate who spent part of his childhood in Ogoja, Nigeria, and he was meant to be a guest alongside Professor Soyinka, but he took ill, so he's not able to be with us. However, he recorded a video message to us, which we listened to at the university this morning. So in a sense, he is with us. I want to recognize the national president of the Association of Nigerian Authors and former minister, Dr. Jerry Agada. And we also have the immediate past national president of ANA, Dr. Wole Soyinka, and other important members of ANA and writers as well. So Professor Akachi Ezebo is here. And I'm really happy that Professor Akachi is sitting here because she's one of those who have written for children, and we know how important literature for children is, so we're excited that she's in this session. Mr. Iman, were you supposed to say something? Yes, I'm going to hand over to the director of the Alliance Française Port Harcourt, Mr. Iman.
Thank you for the venue. I would like to apologize for the non-venue for Mr. Jean-Marie Clezio. He was a problem of health in Mexico, and I hope so that next year he will be coming with us. I'm very sorry about the delay. Last year he was supposed to come, but Mr. Wole Soyinka is very faithful to Rainbow Books Festival. Donc I'm very proud of his venue, and I'm very happy, and I would like to apologize about the venue of Mr. Clezio. Donc next year I will be happy that he will be coming, or perhaps he will come suddenly, but we invite you, okay? Thank you, have a good day now.
Okay, so I will just hand over to you, and are you ready?
What is known as passing the buck. Let me begin by apologizing for the lateness of this program. I assume we're starting late because so many things have started late. So one thing sort of latches onto the deficiency of the others and tries to make up for it. Much of it is to blame with the traffic in Port Harcourt. I just can't believe that Port Harcourt has now reached Lagos level of go slow. And the distances between the various venues and so on. I hate keeping people waiting, especially children. But at the same time, children have got to learn to wait. But at the same time, we'll do everything to make sure that they don't have to wait. When I was a child, I remember anxiety in school when we were waiting for somebody to come up and interrupt the routine, the mundane program, every day to day, and the notion that somebody, it didn't matter what or who or what event, somebody was about to interrupt the rhythm of those canes, of those sadistic teachers. And you know that for a few hours in the day, they cannot reach us because somebody from outside, something from outside was about to happen. And it was part of the excitement, the pleasures of being a school pupil at that particular time. Oh, It's all right. I noticed that there's some adults here, but my understanding is that this is not for adults, it's for children. So I'm really addressing children. You adults were here by accident. I don't recognize your existence. And my business today is strictly with the kids. But since, as usual, adults, you know, they are interlopers. They get crash. So you must forgive them for being present today. And where you're not supposed to be. Of course, within limits. You go beyond the limit, and you must be disciplined. Sorry, you have to go through it. We all went through it. But just that innate burden of being curious about things. What does come to this understanding? I think it is because it was a feature of my existence, my character, that I found most problematic for adults. The only question was always, why are you so curious? Why do you have so many questions? No, what's the matter with you? You want to grow up to be a lawyer or whatever? As if asking questions is only the privilege of lawyers. Yeah. So I came to identify what was this thing about children. Because I didn't think I was alone, I was unique. And it was curious, just being curious about things. Even if the curiosity led nowhere. The important thing is to find out why is this so? And what other things am I missing in what is apparent, what is transparent? There are always things behind what is transparent, what is on the surface, and I always wanted to find out what these were. Whether they were physical, whether they were intellectual, whether they were symbolic, or whatever. That element of curiosity is, I think, what I don't find very troubling, and that's why I was able to identify that particular element. So let me begin by reading to you a chapter, an excerpt. There's initials, which I translated as being E-S-S-A-Y, as in essay. I they were calling him essay because he was a good compositor. He wrote beautiful essays. So, while Christian, in case that appears in this chapter, was a nickname I gave my mother. Be very careful, don't let your parents ever know what nicknames you give them. So they whop you, they thought. I guess what they have this chapter, and I have to describe. I could not climb the ladder by myself, but I already knew where it was. It was an iron ladder, and 4 or 5 of the household would stand on it at once, gazing out. One day, Joseph, that was the house help, relented and hoisted me on his shoulders, and I was able to see the group of dancers disappearing in the direction of the palace and other features of the landscape. And so, the next time that sound came, I did not bother to contest a place on the ladder, which I could not climb anyway. I had recognized now where the gate was. I realized also that one could obtain a much clearer view simply by going outside the gates and watching from there. On reaching the gate, I was surprised to find it latched. I could not reach the wooden peg. I banged on the gate and someone opened it. They were all strangers. They made way for me to come to the front, and we ignored each other's presence at the sight of the police band, the cause of the excitement. They had bright sashes, bright red fez caps with dangling tassels, and what looked like embroidered waistcoats with whiskers. The drum, which was strapped to the man in front, was unbelievable in its size. At every step, I expected him to topple over, but he pounded its white skin with complete mastery. His gaze set rigidly to the front. His arms made flourishes in the air, giving the heavy-ended drumsticks a twirl, then dashing them against his sides. The man in the lead juggled an enormous mace, threw it in the air, spun around, and caught it as it descended. Once he even caught it backwards, earning a roar from the crowd. A gleaming brass funnel arose between the players. The face which blew into it looked as if it would burst. Each time the drum was hit, it seemed that the vibrations entered my stomach, echoed round its walls, and then went out again to rejoin the drum. I noticed little boys following the band. Some walking directly behind, imitating the march of the policeman. I joined them. We marched past the bookshop, and the wall disappeared, and there were inscriptions everywhere. Artist Photo Studio, London trained portraitist. Then, in smaller letters, a trial will convince you. I recognized the photographer because I'd been to the house to take photographs of Deepo, who's my junior brother, when he was born. I made a note to learn how to ride a bike as we marched past a bicycle hirer, busy mending a tube. We passed a small shop in which a machine whirled. A cluster of women waited by the door with their corn-filled basins, and the machine suddenly flushed a whitish mixture into a basin. The starched white lady who visited us sometimes with bags of lozenges apparently also lived in the compound. But there, boldly etched on the gates in a stone-fetched wall, were the words, Miss Makata's Maternity Clinic. We marched straight past the nearby police station. The composition of the group of children around me appeared to change all the time. We passed another signboard, Mrs. T. Banjoko, London trained sewing mistress. We came to a road junction. One arm of the signpost read, to Lafenwa, the other, Igbe, Ibara. The procession followed the latter. There was a market before we got to Ibara, and I turned into the market, wide-eyed. Peppers of all shapes and sizes rose in profusion from wooden and enamel trays. There were mounds of gari, and the earthy smell of yam flour assailed my nostrils long before I came on it. And salt. Nobody, surely, not even a whole arcade, could eat so much salt in 100 years. Then I came upon the piles on the stalls one stall after the other. This gave way to the stalls of meat, with men flashing two-edged knives among the slabs of meat, brushing away flies with one hand, or hitting a small boy, but dozing off while flies landed on the meat. It seemed a long time before the food stopped altogether, giving way to clothes, sewing materials, toys, and even small bookstores with pens, rubbers, inkwells, and notebooks neatly laid out. And then I came to a sudden stop and backed away. Staring me in the eye was a shrunken head of an animal. There were many more things: skulls, snakes, mice, plants, leaves, and barks, dried up and in bottles. The women were much older in these stalls, I noticed, and I experienced shock at their flat, empty breasts. I remembered suddenly that it was wrong to stare, so I looked away. Were these the witches we heard so much about? The nearest looked up suddenly at me, and I returned her gaze. Then she smiled. Her face, which did not look like the face of the living while it was at rest, suddenly turned into the face of the shrunken heads which dangled just above her head. I turned and fled, running all the way till I caught up with the band. The thought had occurred to me that those skulls could have been the skulls of young children who'd been foolish enough to wander too close to the witches' stalls. I recognized from the sign at Belkuta Grammar School that we were passing the compound where Ransom Kuti was principal. My father had explained how I would go to grammar school after I finished in St. Peter's, where I was at the time. I saw no reason why I should wait. I pressed my face against the iron gates and wondered if I should not go in at once and resume my schooling there. And I remembered it was a Saturday, so there would be no schooling. Monday, however, was a different matter, so I would find my way back without difficulty. I understood the difference between a principal and a headmaster. Only a principal could preside over a school as huge and imposing as the one I had just seen. Daudu, that was the nickname of Reverend Kuti, the principal of Dr. Grammar School. Daudi had a deep voice and energetic gestures and rode about on a motorized bicycle, his agbada billowing out on either side of him. One day, his agbada sleeve was caught in the spokes of the wheel. He fell and was brought into a house. A nurse was called and he was eventually taken to hospital after father had smeared his thigh with Vaseline, where the exhaust had burned his thigh. When Daudu emerged from hospital, he bought a car and never rode on the moped again. I marched away from the grammar school and followed the band into another compound where the music stopped with a final drum roll and discovered that I was alone. The ragged, motley group of children who had followed, clowning, mimicking, even calling out orders, had fallen off one by one. And then I made another discovery. I did not know where I was. The sergeant barked some sentences, and the next moment, a white man appeared. He eventually saw me, came across, bent down, and used the most unlikely accent I'd ever heard, asked, "Can you find Benny?" I looked at the sergeant helplessly and said, "I don't understand. What is he saying?" The officer's eyes opened wide. "Oh, so you speak English?" I nodded. "That is very, very clever. I was asking, what do you want? What can I do for you?" "I want to go home." "Well, that seems... And where is home?" he asked. I could not understand why he chose to speak through his nose. It made it difficult to understand him all the time. When I strained hard, I could make sense of his questions. I told him that I lived in Ake. "And your father's name?" "My father's name is Headmaster." Sometimes his name is Essay. For some reason, this amused him immensely, which I found offensive. The sergeant was different. When he spoke, he sounded like the Hausa traders who brought wares to our house for bartering with old clothes and strange assortments of items. They brought brass figures, horses, camels, trays, bowls, ornaments, human figures which spun on podiums and balanced by weights at the end of curved light metal rods. We spun them round and round, yet they never fell off their narrow patch. The smell of fresh leather filled the house as booths, handbags, scrolls, glass beads, bottles of scent with exotic names like Bint el Sudan were unpacked. If the headmaster of Ake being father, I know the place. But what am I doing here? The sergeant asked. "I followed the band," I replied. "How old are you?" "I'm 4.5. He let out a loud, "What?" I stopped and looked at him again, and he looked at me again. We reached his office, and he lifted me into a chair. "Are you thirsty?" Already producing a bottle of orange squash. I drank it, the last drop. The sergeant arrived with his bicycle. Half awake, I felt myself lifted onto the crossbar, and the bumpy ride began. I barely sensed the arrival at home. My head appeared to weigh a ton when I tried to cover weight. I felt the immense expanse of the bed in mother's bedroom coming up to meet me, the room easily recognized by the smell of ori and camphor. I woke up with a huge pit in my stomach and climbed down from the bed. I walked towards the sound from the parlor. 100 pairs of eyes were turned on me. In the silence, I spoke the only thing on my mind. I am hungry. Mouths dropped open. The bookseller's wife struck her hands together in a gesture of amazement and exclaimed, "Hey, Omonla, did you hear him? He is hungry." I could not understand the excitement over the fact of my hunger. Well, it seems only natural that he should be hungry. Wouldn't you be after a walk from Ake to Ibarra? Asked my father. Bookseller's wife swung me onto her back, slipped her wrapper round to secure me tightly. I fell asleep on the way, so I missed food. I woke up in bookseller's wife's bed as I sat down to the biggest breakfast I'd ever set eyes on. There was a feeling that had somehow been the cause of the excitement of the previous night and had, in some way, become markedly different from whatever I was before the march.
Thank you very much, sir. So children, it's actually good to be curious, isn't it? As we can see from this story and Prof's life. So it's actually a good thing to be able to ask questions and be curious within boundaries, as Prof had said before. It's a special session for you children. We know you have questions you want to ask, comments. Earlier this morning at the University of Port Harcourt, you described your childhood as a fulfilling childhood. At the University of Port Harcourt, you said it was a fulfilling childhood. How important was the book, or what role did the book play and reading in this fulfilling childhood?
Well, that's part of what I was saying about curiosity. I was curious about these objects which littered. Oh, littered is the wrong expression. Sorry, my father was a very tidy person. Which were piled up on my father's desk, and of course in his bedroom was this very small library. And I was curious about what was it he was communing with, because he was constantly with these books. So what was the conversation going on between them? What was the dialogue? What's the relationship? From very, very early, very, very early. And I think that's what led me into reading. I went to school at a very early age, remarkably early, confirmed by my first teacher, Mr. Olabaju, simply out of this curiosity, because I knew that somehow school was linked to the books. And I couldn't stand any longer my elder sister going to school with these books, feeling superior, because I was being left at home while she went to school. I just couldn't stand it any longer. Then, of course, I began to look into what was inside the books and discovered a new world. New worlds, in fact, not just a new world. And this one discovery led to further curiosity, more discovery. It was a kind of chain reaction. And so that element of curiosity manifests itself in many, many directions. Some of you will grow up to be engineers, etc., mathematicians, and you'll be led in that direction, I'm convinced, even more than what you actually taught in school, by the fact that you're really curious about how things work. Why is it that motor cars move without being drawn by horses? And there were horses in my neighborhood. What's the cause of the explosion you hear when a car is sputtering to life? So I'm not talking just about literature now. I'm just talking about curiosity about life, about phenomena around you. And that leads you into so many different directions.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure that little boy running around Ake and curious as ever also had dreams. Just like a lot of our children here, I'm sure, have dreams. Did you ever plan to be a writer, or as a child, or did you dream of becoming a pilot or a doctor? What were your dreams?
Various stages. You'll go through, I'm sure, various stages when you want to be this, next year you want to be that. Yes, you're quite right. I know why you, at one time I wanted to be a pilot. When I saw the first airplane, droning, one of these single engine planes going over, and everybody running for cover. Seeing this thing fly in the air. I was just curious when I believed quite early that there was somebody inside there. And so I dreamt of me being up there sooner or later. And then I started talking about sailors, a cadet trading ship, and I wanted to be a sailor, and then I also wanted to be a lawyer, only because people said I asked so many questions that I was obviously going to be a lawyer. So I assumed maybe I'll be a lawyer. I think those was three. But the writing element came effortlessly underneath all of this because I was never totally satisfied with reading these pieces, these works of literature. I found my mind always saying, oh, what would have happened if that character had gone in this direction rather than this, if this character had said this rather than that. And so I was constantly rewriting what I read. And from that, it meant that when my siblings and myself gathered to tell stories which were being told by adults, I found I was never satisfied in reciting the same stories exactly as we received. I always had to tinker with them. And somebody said, no, it didn't go like that, it didn't go like that. I said, well, you never mind that, but this is the way I think it should have gone, or it's more exactly this way. So that's how it happened.
Thank you. Are you children ready with questions? I want to take questions from the children, but while the children are thinking of what they want to ask, you grew up in a different society that these children are growing up in. Today they have computers, they have iPod, mobile phones, the movie industry, and these tend to be like distractions. Do you think, or what is your advice to them in the society in which they're growing, faced with all this multimedia, and we still want to encourage them to read? So what would be your advice to them?
Well, my basic attitude is that the technological explosion is in fact yet another opening, it's another curiosity terrain. And you have a right to be curious about technology, internet, what does it do? There's nothing wrong with video games, basically. The important thing is for children not to be allowed to believe that this is the totality of the world they inhabit, that thereby everything must be jettisoned. I mean, I grew up, I would go to our village, I participated in little, catapult hunting games, I learned traditional games. I said, we created a world of our own. We go into the bush, fetch firewood, and learn about nature, either by a process of osmosis or by asking questions, what is this, what does this do? I grew up understanding that, however suspicious I was, that there are traditional ways of healing, of diagnosing illnesses, some of them efficacious, others not so efficacious. But then, take modern Western medicine, we discovered that whole generations have been destroyed simply because Western medicine was so cocksure about the efficacy of a treatment, only to find that there were side effects which destroyed the individual for life, some of them genetically transmitted. So no system really is perfect. And this is what is lacking, a holistic attitude to the very phenomena of existence, whether you're talking in medical terms, you're talking about cultural terms, just understanding that it's one continuous process of learning, that you don't jettison what you grew up with, simply because a new culture, a new understanding, a new approach to knowledge, which however is dressed up very, tidily, this does not necessarily displace what you had before. Acupuncture, for instance, Chinese acupuncture is coming into, doctors, Western doctors are being compelled in many universities to undergo a training in acupuncture methods, at least to understand it. The so-called traditional alternative medicine is becoming mainstream medicine. So I'm not talking just about literature. And that child is very lucky, who's been exposed to all of this and then can use his or her own analytical skills to compare, to do a comparative process, and to understand that one can augment the other. So internet, the very tempting, seductive, technological means of receiving leisure gratification should not be considered mutually exclusive to other forms which people like me underwent when we were children. And that is where the error is, to so isolate the young generation from their authentic baggage, cultural baggage, technological baggage, and so on, to make them understand that processed farina today, mass-produced, had its technology in the village production of gari, and that in fact one may be tastier than the other, not necessarily the modern one. So it's this, knowledge should never be lost. You don't ever discard any piece of knowledge, even if it's suppressed for a time. Lay yourself wide open for its resurging from your subconscious, so you can relate it to newly acquired methods of understanding phenomena. So this balance.
Very important balance in life. Yemi, you wanted to ask a question, please. Is there a microphone for him?
Yeah, thank you, sir. My name is Yemi at BBC. I write for independent newspapers. Sir, we would like you to tell us the very first book you read, and you've written so many books on poetry, so many novels. Which of these at the inception of your writing career did you find so much comfortable writing?
Two questions, all right? The answer to the first is I frankly don't remember. I read Yoruba books. Some made impressions on me more than others, and by that Yoruba books I mean not just fact books, but pamphlets. I read Agunwa very early. It took an impression on me that I could not rest until I translated the first one, and I recently, after a long break, translated another one. But in terms of which book made the strongest impression on me, particularly it was a Greek book, a Greek play. And I remember it very strongly. It was the Medea of Euripides. I don't think that what I read at the time was not in its original version. I think it was slightly bowdlerized. And the only reason I read it was that it was in my father's very small, tiny library, wedged between bottles of his port and sherry, which I used to go and pinch from when I was small. And there's something about that play, I've never forgotten it. There's a power of language in it, in translation. So that's one. It does not mean that it was necessarily the first book I read, because there were also tales from Shakespeare in bowdlerized version, narrated. It's Charles Dickens, I remember, but I remember very distinctly that this was what exerted the greatest power on me in terms of literature. Then, which books, which genre?
Yes,
which genre am I most comfortable in?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think it's theater, it's drama. I feel drama has so many levels, so many dimensions. There's the writing, there's the directing, there's translation, transmission of what is in the text onto the stage. So I think that's the one which I'm most excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Dapo Adeni, and I publish position. The question which I want to ask is actually inspired by the last